Hello everyone. Today we are discussing about the topic and our podcast is based on the ethics of the new technology and how good is the adaptation of the technology in between the organization by the people. So this is a very hot topic. It is not a new topic. I will say that it is discussed in decades because the human are always connected towards evolution, towards changing mindset, and this is the things where this technology start developing and we are a part of it. And when we are talking about the technologies, we always think that technology is something that is bringing positive influence in our life. But on the other side, we have some doubts as well, some fears as well. We all want that the technologies in our lives is to fulfill the promise of improvement, betterment, and development, to delight us more than it scares us, to help much more than it harms. We also know that every new technology needs to earn our trust. Too often, the pattern goes like this: a technology is introduced, it grows rapidly, and then it comes to permeate our lives, and only then does the society begins to see and address any problems it might create. Sometimes it is too late, and most of the cases it is too late. Then we can see the problems or the pitfalls that our technology can bring. The reason is that there are many factors of the societies that are running together, or they are not in hand developing them together. And that might be the reason that sometimes the problems occur later and the technology is adopted much earlier. This is not exclusively a modern phenomenon. Consider the early days of the mass-produced automobile, as drivers embraced an exciting new mode of transport. But on the other hand, accidents and fatalities were many times more likely than they are today. Reason is that, let's go and make it in the imagination, if the growth of the automobile had gone differently. The seat belts were developed much earlier, the safer roads were built much earlier, and the better traffic laws and system, both of them were implemented much earlier. Right along with the engine innovations that give us more power and greater speed and more comfortable and high speed cars, many risks could have been mitigated and many tragedies might have been avoided. But there is a very common point. There are two main factors which are working here. One factor is that our society needs fast cars. The second one is that society is not ready to make a system for the fast cars, because the fast cars is driven by 10% or 15% of the population, that or might be 35% of the population owns a car. But on the other side, the rest of 65% does not possess that car, but they have to live with the drivers. There are children, those are not driving the cars, but they are on the roads on their bicycle. So how a society adopted earlier? Let's go back and look into this case, and many of your answers will come up into your mind. The same situation is with the companies as well. Companies have to learn to be responsible stewards of the artificial intelligence they deploy. The 5G networks they have, and they are investing into their 5G networks, and so much more that is coming toward us, from quantum computing to virtual reality to blockchain. Technologies that are driving sweeping change and are central to the growth of the economy should be trustworthy. Companies that deliver technology advances need to act very ethically. The stakes are much higher, and yet knowing what needs to be done is not the same as knowing how. Organizations should try to anticipate and address the potential effects of the technologies they are going to deploy. While they cannot predict the future, they can adopt a sound framework that will help them prepare for and to respond to the unexpected impacts. Such a framework would need to fundamentally shift how we develop and deploy new technologies. It would have to revamp existing processes. Any framework should reflect that this is a team effort, not just the job of the engineer, designers, architects, or managers. It should cut across the disciplines within the organizations. It should open doors to new ways of thinking about the challenges. The goal here is to describe a framework that can do these things and to mitigate the risk at much earlier level. One of the most important topic in is to involve the specialist from the beginning. Why? Why to involve the specialists of all types of the business on the very earlier to mitigate the risk? Those who are immersed in the world of software engineering, I work very close with the software engineers. I am not a software engineer, I am a business strategist and business developer. Most of the time, they are inclined to see, first and foremost, the promise of a technology and the opportunity to create value, the value addition factor. As questions about the impact of a technology become more common, the engineers still have far to go in understanding the potential harms. Engineers and software developers do not necessarily have all the expertise they need to understand and address the ethical risk they might have from their work. In other words, there could be a role for specialists from other disciplines here as well. We need to change our priorities to help technology development teams think with more foresight and nuance about these issues, guided by those with the most relevant knowledge. Consider, for instance, the development of the virtual reality training tool that immerses the user in a difficult or dramatic emergency response situation. As the technology is evolving, and it will evolve, VR simulations are becoming so realistic that the possibility of actual trauma from a virtual experience might need to be addressed. The team would want to have psychologists involved, working side by side with the software engineers, with the system architects, with the system developers, to tap into the body of knowledge about what can cause trauma or how it might be identified and addressed. Take cloud computing, cloud manufacturing, 3D printing as another example, which is a very hot topic in our today's world, especially in technology, in manufacturing, in business development, or in product management. As companies pursue these technologies, which have the potential to dramatically change the skill set needed on the factory floor, they might talk to the labor economist who can shed light more on larger workforce issues. As 5G connectivity brings factories online that can be managed entirely and remotely, companies may want to consult such specialists in plant security, cyber security, and perhaps even philosophy to understand the potential pitfalls created by the factories that the people around them that do not employ people, those might have the issue of any type of security. Let's pause for a while and plan for the future. Let's pause it. During the strategic planning stage, a team will naturally focus its attention on what is possible. They always talk about what is possible, and it is the requirement. When you are going up to start a strategic development goal or target or any process, the planning always starts with what is possible. That is where the excitement and enthusiasm lie. But there also has to be attention paid to understanding what can go wrong. It is vital to pause and brainstorm potential risks, consider negative outcomes, and imagine unintended consequences. This might mean that as businesses rush towards the 5G future with a giant leap in data speeds and ubiquitous connectivity, they should pause to consider and address new privacy concerns, perhaps well beyond those we are already grappling with, or they could consider how this leap in data speeds may exacerbate inequity in our society and widen the digital divide. This step in the planning process is in which risks are brainstormed and analyzed much earlier could and should be documented just as clearly as the value propositions or the expected return on the investment. The mandate to document this work can help ensure that it becomes part of the effort. Deloitte is a renowned company, especially in consultancy, has developed more than 300 questions exploring ethical and trust dimensions, which can inform the strategic planning process and its results. And why Deloitte has do it? Because the tendency is to think of technical ethics in the context of the issues that have already surfaced, such as discriminatory bias in a social media marketing or talent acquisition system. But this is a flawed way of thinking because it can make us stop short of seeing other, potentially far greater, ethical risks. And it fails to consider the nuances that cut across organizations, industries, customers, and products. After assessing potential negative impacts from a particular new technology and building a team that has relevant experience, it is important to go deeper, more deep dive. The team has to do the research, and from there, it should be possible to begin to establish the guardrails that can minimize risks and mitigate the potential harms at much earlier levels. Leaders should mandate the development of the ethical risk mitigation strategies as part of the planning for new technology projects. One of the most important area, and I really want to deep dive into it, or at least I can discuss it in a bit briefly. Please assign the accountability between the organizations to different lay people at different levels as well. It can also be clarifying to ask early on what would be the accountability on this project. Who would be the accountable if an organization has to answer for the unintended or negative consequences of its new technology? Accountability should be considered when documenting the approach to potential impacts during the strategic planning processes. When a company is called to account for the technology it developed or deployed, someone could end up testifying to Congress, appearing in the court, or answering questions from the media. Will that person be the CEO or CTO or CIO, a data scientist, a founder, a machine operator, a technology IT basic executive, or somebody else? Because the accountability is concerned to every position within the organization. A discussion on this subject may well encourage more rigorous thinking about what could go wrong. Of course, more rigorous attention to such negative outcomes is exactly the point and may improve the chances that no one ever has to appear before policymakers or a judge to address how a piece of technology came about in the first place. Appoint a chief technical ethical officer or a accountability officer or a compliance officer that will help, or a risk mitigation officer. The best method to address the ethics of new technologies are not going to be on the one size fits all mindset. This mindset is good, but this is not be able to implement in all type of organization or fulfill the need of all type of organizations. A broad range of the potential impacts may need to be examined, and a varied collection of potential risks may have to be mitigated. But most organizations would likely benefit from placing a single individual in charge of these processes. This is why an organization should consider a chief ethics officer or chief technology ethics officer or chief compliance officer who would have both the responsibility and the authority to marshal necessary resources. Some industries have grappled with trust and ethics challenges for decades. Hospitals and research centers have long employed ethics officers to oversee questions in research projects and clinical medical practices. For instance, technology can certainly raise new concerns. Even here, think of a medical school implementing a virtual reality tool to help augment the competency of surgeons and the importance of examining whether the tool works equally well across race or gender. But the broader point is that trust and ethics issues can be managed effectively as long as the proper leadership commitments are made. With a chief technology ethics officer or compliance officer in place, it remains important to involve specialists from a number of different disciplines as discussed previously. These people may come from the fields of anthropology, sociology, philosophy, and other areas. Depending on the issues presented by a specific technology or application, it may be necessary to seek out people who bring knowledge of law, politics, regulation, education, or media. What might be the challenges we might have and the opportunities we also have at the same time? Our ability to ethically manage and increase trust in our technology tools is expected to only gain in importance in coming years as technology evolves, accelerates, and reaches more deeply into our lives. This will likely and lively challenge every company and business, and it may have bruising lessons for the organizations that fail to keep pace. But opportunities are also everywhere to be seen. If you can imagine a world in which vehicle and traffic safety progressed as faster than the development of the automobile, then you can probably imagine the benefits that could accrue for those who get these challenges right. The technology is providing us a cutting, emerging, challenging, and competencies, but at the same time, they have some drawbacks that we have to sort it out at much earlier stages, and we have to look into them. We have to look at a thing that bring us some positive impact on our life might have some negative impact as well. So do not close our eyes from the negative impact on the very earlier level, and that can help us to mitigate the risk at much better level. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed our podcast today on the topic of the risks involved and the ethics concerned to the technology. If you have any questions or anything is not clear or you want to cover more in detail, please write into the comment section and subscribe to our channel Audiobooks Junkie on YouTube, and we will love to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the day.